Welcome to the Photo Flunky Show, episode 108. Today on the Photo Flunky Show, we're going to be talking about 10 things you wish you knew before starting photography. Hi, my name is William Beem.
Hi, my name is Lee Beem.
And before we get started with the show, we want to let you know that show notes are going to be available at williambeem.com/episode 108. And there are links to subscribe there and also at our player at photoflunky.com. And I want to let you also know that I've got a coupon code. If you want to save money on MacFun software, which is now called Skylum, S-K-Y-L-U-M, I can save you $10 on Luminar or $10 on Aurora or 10% on anything else that they sell. And there's two ways you can go to this, depending on which name you want. So if you want to go to williambeem.com/MacFun, that works. Or you can go to williambeem.com/Skylum, and that also works.
Sounds good. I love coupon codes.
Everybody loves coupon codes.
Deals.
We have a list of 10 things you wish you know before starting photography. And in hindsight, this is just a really stupid topic because I bet you're already a photographer.
Yeah, but sometimes it's funny to look back at stuff and see what you've learned.
Well, we're going to try and make this useful. If you want to refer this episode to someone who's thinking about starting photography or just started and they want to know what they're getting into, this is our take on those things that you kind of wish that you knew before you got into it. Because we all go through photography and learn kind of like, it's almost like the little hard knock life from Annie.
Yeah, it is. But you know what the thing is? This is usually, well, for me, certainly, I think this would have been more useful kind of 6 to 12 months into my starting photography seriously. When I started out, I think a lot of people start out and the thing that you need to do is what camera to buy that takes nice photos, and that's it. And the rest of the stuff starts to hit you once the camera arrives and you start trying to use it. A lot of people, I think, don't really look into these things seriously before they start, before they invest in a camera. They get the camera and then realize, oh my goodness, where do I start?
And you know what? Let's start with our first one is it may be expensive. And I use the word may. Almost every camera I pick up, from my iPhone up to my high-end DSLR, can take nice photos.
Yeah.
We've got that little Canon point and shoot. It takes wonderful photos. I'm really happy with, I've got an iPhone, 8 Plus? Yeah, because I didn't get the 10. But it takes wonderful photos too, under good lighting conditions.
Yeah, that's the thing with the iPhones. They need the good lights.
The reason I say it may be expensive is because you start wanting more and more. So if you want better quality in low light conditions, then you want a bigger sensor that captures more light and doesn't make so much noise on the phone. That costs money. You need lenses maybe that allow more light in, have a wider aperture. That costs money. If you want features on your phone, so like you can program it to do things that maybe the lower end cameras can't do, that was going to cost you money as well. You want the little articulating screen. All these little things add up. And if you get into wildlife or sports photography, heaven help you for your budget.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't have to be expensive in order to take great photos. It really depends on what you want to do. You're not paying necessarily for a camera that takes great photos because pretty much all of them do. They've got really nice results. Even with a tiny little sensor that's in a smartphone, you can get great photos with that. But when you start saying, well, I want to be able to take great photos in low light or far away or any number of those little situations,
yes,
that's when you start spending money. And you might want to think about that before you invest in your first camera. If you know that photography is something that you're going to really want to stick with, start looking at what you want to do and when and where you want to do it, and then buy the camera and gear once rather than buying something and then saying, this doesn't do what I need to do.
Yeah, I'm going to weigh in on that. I think for photography, because it can be so expensive and also because your destination can change, your goals can change, I think get a good lens when you start. With the camera body, honestly, when you start off, get something to get you started and get you familiar with it.
Yeah.
If you buy into a system, whether it be Nikon or Canon or Sony, whatever it is, as long as you can interchange the lenses and use them with any camera body, the camera bodies are just, you sell one, buy another. It kind of offsets the cost and you upgrade a little bit. It doesn't hurt as much as the initial purchase.
Well, that's true. It's like the lenses that I've got are for full frame Nikon. I started with my first full frame was the D700. They work just as well on my D800. I'm looking at one day getting the D850. They'll work fine on that. So they're interchangeable within that Nikon system. A lot of people recommend for your first lens to get a 50 millimeter prime. I got to say, that is probably the least used focal length that I've ever taken. I either go wide or I go long, but I don't really stick in the middle.
I love my 50.
And a lot of people do. It's a matter of taste. The other reason is a 50 millimeter prime isn't very expensive. You can get one for like $150 or less.
Yeah, really. Look, it's not a sharp lens, but it's just, I do like the focal length of the 50 mil.
Some people really, really
Yeah.
love it, but you like that 35 millimeter also.
I like the sharpness of the 35. I have to get really close and I would like to zoom just a little bit with it. The 35 is a much better lens.
Well, it's more expensive
and I prefer doing that. And it allows me, I'm able to crop in on that, but I do need to crop in on it because I don't get as close. And you know me, I shoot tight. So,
but you know what? I think when you're learning, the ultimate sharpness is not what you're after. You're looking to understand your exposure, your creativity, and your compositions and so forth. So the 50 is, for that reason, I think a good place to start. But it's just that after you've progressed beyond that, in my case, that's the last focal length I want to use.
Yeah. And also you get various, you get different models of the 50. I've got one of the really old ones.
Oh, so do I.
Yeah. And I like that. But sometimes manually focusing, the manual focus on there is much better than the autofocus. It's one of those things where you really, I learned to learn how to use the lens.
That makes sense to me.
It wasn't idiot proof. It was a good learning experience.
Number 2 on our list, technical skills aren't the important part.
Oh, no, they really aren't.
Now, that's not to say that you don't need to have technical skills, but what we're saying here is learn the technical skills and then apply them. So the technical skills you need to learn are how to create a good exposure. And then your creativity can tell you whether you want to change that, but you want to learn how to use your meter. You want to learn how to use your aperture, ISO, and shutter speed to do creative things. Other settings in your camera, you really want to know your camera. The technical part isn't what makes a great photograph. Number 3, your vision is the important part.
Yes.
All right,
that's what it comes down
I know that one was one of yours. Go ahead.
Well, you got to really know what you want to do with your photography. And I kind of blundered along blindly. Everything felt overwhelming. I mean, when I started, I just wanted to disregard the technical stuff because I was interested in the arty side, the creative side. I knew what I wanted to do. I had visions for what I wanted to do.
You just didn't know the technical parts.
I didn't know the technical parts. And I found the technical parts really frustrating because they got in my way and slowed me down from just doing what I knew I wanted to do. And I had to figure out how. And I think a lot of people might come in from a different angle where they're fascinated by the technical aspects and they learn that. But the creative side is something they have to learn. I don't know if it's easier or harder to learn one than the other, but whatever your shortcoming is, that's the one where you need to put in the effort. For me, having the vision, I think, helped me a lot. And mine has changed. But I did have, even if it was misguided sometimes or a little bit of a shot in the dark, I always had somewhere I wanted to go with my photography.
Well, it is very likely that your vision is going to change. And before I get onto that, let me just make sure I explain in case anybody's not clear. The vision is kind of like pre-visualizing what the final result is going to be. And that means you know how bright or dark it's going to be. You know what their light and shadows are going to be. You know where you're going to compose the image. You've already thought through, is there going to be motion in your photograph? Is there going to be a blurry background? All those little details that you see in other people's photos, you want to have that in your head before you go off and start taking the shot. Yeah. You want to be there. If it's a sunset, you want to be there at the right time. If it's a portrait, you want to make sure the light is just perfect on your subject. If it's, sports or action, are you going to try and freeze the frame, or are you going to try and show some motion blur? Yeah. All those little things are the important part because that's the creativity. The technical skills are simply what allow you to do what your vision says. So with that, we come up to number 4, and that is to know your camera's features and settings by heart.
This has got to be one of the most important things. I think there were 2 things that I had to understand that were fundamental and that kind of covered all the technical aspects. And this was one of them. I don't want to jump ahead because we're going to discuss one of the others later. But once I got to know my camera by feel, it made such a difference. And obviously, when you get a new one, you have to kind of figure things out again. But it's never as hard as the first time. And knowing what to hit when the light is low or when you need to do something really quickly, you don't want to have to, recompose your shots and you can feel your way around makes such a difference.
Well, think how frustrating it is. And you already experienced this. You know what you want to do, but you've got to stop paying attention to your subject and fiddle with the camera to say, how do I do that?
Well, you can lose the shot like that.
Well, particularly if there's a moment that's going to pass. So if you're doing something like an event, a sport, or even a wedding or some kind of action shot, the moment passes. You need to be ready. And in order to be ready, you need to be aware of your camera and how it works So you're prepared for when those moments come.
Yeah, absolutely.
Number 5, photography is about compromise. And I say that kind of thinking about the exposure triangle, your aperture, your shutter speed, and your ISO setting. You can do creative things, but in order to set one of those, it's going to impact the other, one or two at least, and as to how you get the exposure that you want. So if you want motion and blur, you need to slow down your shutter speed, but then you're letting in a lot of light.
Yeah.
And then you need to tighten up your aperture so you don't have that great depth of field, unless you want to put on a neutral density filter, and then you can't really see your subject when you're trying to focus on it.
Yeah, that's the other thing.
It's not just the exposure triangle that's about compromise. Sometimes it is about traveling. It's like you want to get all these wonderful shots, but do you really want to lug around a lot of heavy gear? I've been known to do that in the past. If I'd travel to another city, I would take a rolling camera bag, and then I had all the lenses with me. But then when I go out walking around or to my site, I don't want to carry that lugging bag. I've got to fit something into a smaller bag, and then I don't have everything I want. So it's really dependent upon what you want to do and where you're willing to compromise with it. Sometimes for travel, I know people will get kind of ultra zoom lenses. So I used to have on Cop Sensor, it was an 18 to 200 millimeter.
Mm-hmm.
I think for full frame on Nikon, at least, it's a 28 to 300 millimeter. And those are actually not bad lenses at all. And they can do a lot of things. They're not going to be as good as maybe your f2.8 zoom lenses or maybe some of your primes if you want to get that, nice bokeh in the background. But those are compromises. Is compromise on your exposure, compromise about the weight of how much you want to carry. And again, maybe you want a lighter weight camera, you go with something smaller, whether it's a crop sensor or a mirrorless or, a micro four thirds. Who made up the name micro four thirds?
I don't know.
They're bad at math. Whatever it is, even the little point and shoot we have, they're great. They're lightweight. You can walk around with them and not have to lug a bunch of stuff. But with that smaller sensor, they're not going to work as well in low light. And, that's a compromise you might have to make unless you've got a tripod with you. So when I say photography is about compromise, no matter what you want to do, there's something you wish was different.
Yes.
And that is all because of mother physics. There is only so much light that will come in. The sensor size is only so big. And if you want more light and more sensor size, you lug more stuff that's heavy.
Yes, you do.
So that was that. Now, number 6, this kind of goes back a little bit about knowing your camera features by heart, but I believe that the sooner you use manual settings, the sooner you will understand exposure.
Oh, absolutely. Well, that was the big thing for me. That was my turning point in photography.
This is particularly true when you're using off-camera flash, and we'll talk about that later. But if you really want to understand your exposure, instead of relying on those automatic settings that do things for you, whether it's aperture priority, shutter priority, or the ubiquitous P for professional that does both.
Yes, P for professional.
P for professional.
A for amateur.
If you set it for your manual settings where you have to meter the scene that you have, set your ISO, shutter speed, and aperture yourself, you will understand quickly what makes a good exposure. And not necessarily a correct one. I mean, you can start with a correct one, but if you want to get creative, you might want to make it brighter or darker depending on your circumstances.
And also you learn with post-processing sometimes that it's better to have something a bit underexposed or maybe in certain cases slightly overexposed or whatever it is. Depends what you want to do. But you get used to working with certain types of exposures in your post-processing and you get to learn when to sort of shift the guidelines and suggestions a little bit.
The next one is going to be off-camera flash is your friend. And I say that because it kind of goes with the manual settings. When you're working with exposure, that is global. In other words, everything that you see in your frame, it affects that whole scene. But you can set that so that your whole scene is maybe just a little bit darker than what it really is, and then use off-camera flash and adjust the power of that to light your subject, and then have 2 sets of exposure, really, because your exposure triangle is ISO, aperture, and shutter speed. But when you add off-camera flash, then you add in flash power and the distance between your flash and subject. So you're making 2 exposures, really, at the same time. It's very flattering to your subject once you understand how to use off-camera flash. It's not that difficult. Matter of fact, one of the recommendations I'm going to make, Scott Kelby recently came out with a book called The Flash Book, and I will put a link to that in the show notes. Matter of fact, I'll put a link out right now. It'll be williambeam.com/theflashbook, and that will be an affiliate link for Amazon. But I think it is a really great book because a lot of people think that off-camera flash is difficult, and it's really not. And Scott's done a great job, I think, of explaining that. So I'll put that link in the book. But I think when you start understanding how to set your ambient exposure and then add just a little kiss of light, you really open up your possibilities. And I would just say off-camera flash is your friend. Lee's not talking on this.
I'm not, because I'm just lazy about flash, because it's just a hassle to set things up. I know it's really good. I'm not arguing about how great it is. I'm lazy.
I think it's a hassle right now because you don't know. And also with the Nikon flash system, with the CLS stuff that we had, the new Nikon flashes have radio triggers, which is much, much better. But you know what? I did a show a while back talking about why I'm changing my lighting system up to using the Godox, the Flashpoint system. That's also Godox, is the same name or same product, different names. Those have built-in wireless triggers. And I think once I show you that, you'll realize that this is very simple to use, because you don't have to deal with line of sight. You don't have to, it solves a lot of problems.
Okay.
And it's much less expensive than buying the Nikon or Canon brand.
Especially for me, because you bought them already.
I've already bought them. So I'll give you training later.
Okay, cool.
Okay. Now, putting all of that together, number 8, you can take great photos if you remember 3 things: background, light, and subject.
Mm-hmm.
First off, having a crappy background will ruin any photo that you make.
Oh, absolutely.
You remember, like, when we were out of Animal Kingdom years ago and Tove was taking our photo, and we kept saying, all right, move this cup, move that cup. And she's looking at us like, why? And that was foreground. But it's like, we were trying to make sure that the two of us, which were the subjects, didn't have any distractions.
I know. I mean, you guys have seen me when I sit down to take a photo. I mean, we were out for lunch last week, and twice, as I was ready to take a photo of the food that I'd set up and cleared everything along the table out of the way to disturb the rest of my family, the server came down and flung some napkins down right there. It just...
That was the first time. The second time, she reached in and picked up a little saucer.
Something up. Yeah. And I thought, man, I was just like, I quit. I'm done. But yeah, it is so important to me. Everyone's got used to having the whole table rearranged because I'm taking pictures of my food.
And that's foreground, but the background's like, have you ever seen someone that's posting a photo on Facebook and you look and said, what's that behind them? Oh, it's like their dirty laundry or their toilet or some photo bomber.
I actually asked, because I'm just kind of brazen, a bit of a jerk like that, but it was a genuine question. Somebody had a photo of themselves, really pretty girl, all nicely dressed up, and there was a toilet behind her and some filthy, tacky looking shower curtain there. So I guess she was standing in her bathroom, and I just said, does it not bother anybody now to take photos of themselves with a toilet and a shower curtain in the background, or are we over that? And
it's like they're only concentrating on the subject. You need a nice, interesting subject, whether it's a person, a place, a thing, whatever it may be. But the background really matters. And for your background, you might be looking for something simple. You might be looking for a color, or maybe just something that drops off to black or is completely white. Whatever it is, you want to remove and eliminate any distraction that you can.
Yes.
All right, light. Your light has kind of a language of its own. Is it soft light? Is it warm? Is it going to be hard and have harsh shadows on it? Depending upon your subject, that matters.
Yeah, it does.
You don't want to see a beautiful bride with a lot of harsh shadows on her face.
Or green lights or blue lights. Or...
Yeah, the color of the light, the harshness, the quality of it, and even the direction. It's like you don't want to see typically a female model with light on one side of her face and darkness on the other side.
No, not usually, unless you're going for something specific.
I mean, in that case, it'll be something creepy, I think. Because usually that's specific. That one eye kind of catches a little bit of light.
I know, but sometimes somebody's after a look. What I'm saying is there will be exceptions, but yeah, that's not a girl's look.
And of course, we mentioned subject. Obviously, your subject needs to be interesting to people, and it could be anything, but you want to make sure that it works with the background and the light.
Yes, so absolutely.
If you want to take great photos, just keep that in mind: background, light, and subjects. If you nail those 3 things, you will have an interesting photo. Number 9, this one was one of mine. Lee didn't, I don't know if she really likes this one or not, but I'm going to say most of the really cool shots require really expensive lenses.
Oh.
And I say most, not all.
I understand what you're saying with this, so I don't disagree. I think you need to explain it though, because...
Well, here's what I mean by this. When I say really cool shots, I'm talking about things that are beyond the normal, something that you're not going to get with your 50 millimeter. If you want that really rich bokeh, then you're probably going to look for an f1.4 lens. You can do it with an f2.8, but the difference is you might have to zoom out to 200 millimeters rather than do it at 85 millimeters.
Yeah.
And if you want to get some of these sports shots or wildlife photos, you're going to be shooting with a 500 or 600 millimeter lens and a teleextender on there. So you're going to be spending thousands of dollars to get those beautiful bird shots. It's not saying that you can't do it with maybe a 200 millimeter lens, but you need to get really close to the wildlife then, and sometimes they don't really cooperate.
They don't, but also I think when you get to the stage where you're looking at these really cool shots, you've usually spent a considerable amount of time working towards something. You've got a very clear idea on where your interest and your focus lies. And I think that is maybe a time where you're going to look and say, this is going to cost.
And I think also low light is going to be another situation where you need to have that very wide aperture, usually a prime lens that's, f1.4 or something of that nature, because you need to gather as much light as you can in a situation that's not really providing a lot of light. Now, there are exceptions to this, and you can do with very inexpensive lenses. You can do something like long exposure where you're going to tighten up the aperture, and you can do that with a very inexpensive lens, and you can let light streaks come in maybe down a road, or if you want to blur out the clouds or maybe get that silky smooth water, you don't need to spend an expensive lens on that. So that's why I said most of the really cool shots, not all of them. Sometimes the type of photography that you want to do is gear dependent. Not always, but some of the really cool shots are for people that have already kind of figured out what they want to do and they have to buy specific gear to do it. Sports photography is particularly going to be one of those.
Oh, yeah.
All right, our last one, number 10. Photography is ultimately about relating to your subject.
Yes, absolutely. I completely agree.
And your subject, we're not going to choose that this is just about people and doing portraits. If you're going to take food photography, you need to understand what makes the food look attractive.
You do. I mean, you really need to engage with your subject, and your subject might not be a person or an animal or anything that's alive, but you really want to get into the mood and the feel of it. You need to feel the results of the photo.
Let's take, something as simple as a bottle of wine or anything in a bottle. You can just sit down on a counter, take a picture of it. It's really not interesting at all. You set it up in a dark area and you get a couple of strip lights on either side. So you've got that little rim of light going up the edge of the bottle on both sides. And then have a little splash of light on the label. So you're controlling the light. You're relating to your subject then because you're trying to make this look appealing. You want somebody to buy it. You want somebody to want that wine.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with product photography of any type. How you light it and how you show it is really going to make a difference. If you're shooting automotive photography, going out at high noon, taking a picture of your cool car is not going to look as nice as if you pick, maybe morning or evening and then you've got some side light coming in.
And most of the time, you're always going to get exceptions to things.
Well, it's really ultimately about what is your story? What are you saying about the thing that you're shooting? If you're shooting a cityscape at night, or do you want to shoot it at night? Do you want to shoot it at day? Because there are some places that it don't have to be at sunrise or sunset. Maybe sometimes you want to show a nice, bright, sunny day with maybe with the sun behind you, showing the city or the park or wherever you may be. That may be the right thing to do, but it's about understanding your subject and understanding the people who are going to be looking at your photograph and say, what do they really want to see?
Well, you want to get the mood out that you want to convey.
And think about Orlando. That's, where we live. This is a family destination for vacations. A lot of people want to say, I want to have a great day in Orlando. They're not necessarily thinking about the nightlife. They're thinking about taking their kids out. You want to be able to show something that looks perfect on a nice
blue sky, sunshine,
blue sky, green grass, and whatever the building is or park or whatever it may be. You want to be able to take the photo that those people say, that's where I want to spend my time. That's where I want to go.
Yeah, that's true.
Being able to relate to your subject and present it to people that are interested in it. That's really the relationship that photography is mostly about. That's our top 10 list of things you wish you knew before you started photography. And honestly, if you're just getting started, maybe this will help you save a little time, money, or direction. But these are things that I think most photographers that I know have gone through, and they're just, they're kind of lessons learned. So we hope this helps you. And if you've got any things that you want to add to the list or any questions you want to ask, please leave us a comment in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening to us on the Photo Flunky Show. We really appreciate you. Show notes are going to be available at williambeam.com/episode 108. Also, if you're into portrait photography and you use Lightroom, I've got a set of free portrait brushes for you. You can go to williambeam.com/free brushes, and that will help you edit the eyes, the teeth, light or dark skin, and just make things a little bit better and easier for you. So please go to williambeam.com/free brushes and get your set. We are available on iTunes, Google Play Music, Blueberry, Stitcher Radio, or you can just go to photoflunky.com and listen to us on the player. Thank you so much. We'll see you again next week.